Marques Hagans was a great hire by Penn State, but he's got to be able to do more than just recruit really well. He's got to do all the things that Taylor Stubblefield didn't do right.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. That is FanDuel.com/Locked On. My name is Zach Seyko, and joining me once again, and how can we not, with one of the biggest dual meets of the year on the slate, number one versus number two, Penn State and Iowa in wrestling, and we welcome back the voice of Penn State wrestling, and that is Jeff Ironhead Byers. Jeff, thanks so much for your time again with as busy as you are, since Penn State is now getting ramped up here in the thick of it.
Yeah, this is a fun week. Be doing a lot of media hits both here and in Iowa, and this is just always a fun week of the year for, I think, both of these programs and for college wrestling in general. This is kind of the Duke, North Carolina of college basketball, or Michigan, Ohio State of college football. It's that type of a matchup and that type of a rivalry, and I think it gets fans in general, and certainly the fans of the two programs, very hyped, and it'll be an exciting match Friday night, no doubt.
Well, I hope all our returning viewers from the last time we did a preview, which was Penn State and Michigan, and we talked about Sparty a little bit too. That wasn't the one in the Bryce Jordan Center though, but I hope people are going to appreciate it just as much, because we gave quite the insight for Penn State and Michigan, and we're pretty spot on with the way that dual meet was going to go. So I hope that our words will carry over into Penn State and Iowa, and we can kind of give the same accurate assessment when we get into that. So that's going to be our final segment. We're going to save the best for last. We're also going to recap Penn State and Michigan and Penn State, Michigan State when it comes to wrestling. But to open up, we're going to start with Penn State and signing Marques Hagans. It is official. Penn State is bringing on the next wide receivers coach. Jeff, what have you heard? What do you like, or what do you know about this hire that this just makes sense for James Franklin and this Penn State football coaching staff?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about him. I think, the few things I've heard is that he is an aggressive recruiter, has done a nice job doing whatever he's been asked to do. Virginia certainly had some success with its receiving core. And I think, it's one of those things right now where James Franklin has done a very good job pretty consistently. I mean, there have been some misses in there, but pretty consistently he's bringing in coaches and players that fit what he wants to do with this program. And I don't know a whole lot about him, but everything I've read, it sounds like this is, it's a hire that makes sense. It's somebody that's looking to climb the coaching ladder. And I think, this is obviously a good spot right now to land if you're trying to do that. And I think he has a pretty clear understanding of what it is James Franklin is expecting from the position. And obviously that's to coach up the receivers for sure. But I think also to hit the recruiting trail hard and make sure, Penn State is keeping up on that front. So I think it's going to be a good fit. I think that, right now it just feels like everything's kind of in place. I think, these next 2 years are, I won't say make or break, but it feels like this is the time where Penn State's got to make that move up, that next step, if you will, into becoming an elite program, to use James Franklin's terminology. And I think this feels like a good hire. Again, I don't know a whole lot, but just reading the brief bio and knowing what James Franklin is looking for, it feels like it's a pretty good fit for what Penn State is hoping to get out of that position right now.
Well, and what I really like about Hagans himself is the loyalty. I mean, I know he was Virginia born and raised. Like, he grew up in Hampton. He went to high school in the area. He ends up going and playing for the Cavaliers, and he goes to the NFL. And that was the first time he was actually outside of Virginia. Then he comes back to the stomping grounds, becomes a graduate assistant, and then basically is in the same position for the entire time for the past decade here. So now he has a little bit of a change up. Do you think that's going to hold him back any sort of way, since he was so used to a way of life and being in Virginia? Do you think there's going to be anything that he's going to have to shake off now that he's in a somewhat of a different environment, if you will?
I don't. I think that the feel I get is that, he just kind of, again, to me, it's and maybe this is the glass half full personality of me, but it feels to me like this is a guy who feels like, what, maybe I need that change of scenery just to try to take that next step. And it also feels like maybe this was a situation where he didn't want to leave unless it was the ideal or, truly the right fit. And I think, again, as a Penn State fan, I think you ought to be excited that somebody's willing to leave what clearly was a very comfortable spot and where he was having success to take the opportunity to join your school, your program. And, I look at it more as I think he's going to be able to bring, again, maybe just a little different perspective, a little different wrinkle to the Penn State coaching staff. And again, I don't think Franklin's bringing in somebody if he isn't feeling, Franklin isn't feeling like, this is a guy that's going to fit in with what we're doing and with the approach that we're taking. And so, I think it's a good thing that he was there as long as he was. The other thing is, again, I don't mean to keep going back to the recruiting, but it's a big part of the game right now, always has been. And I do think, Penn State is looking at that Maryland, Virginia area as fertile recruiting ground. And I think this is obviously somebody that has established very strong ties throughout that region. And I think, again, Penn State knows that that's an area that it has to draw from, and it has. But I think this, I think James Franklin feels like this will help shore that part of the program up. And again, to me, it just feels like a good fit on both sides. I think, he feels like this is a good spot for him, and I think Penn State, I'm guessing Franklin had a short list of guys that he was going after, and I don't know, obviously, with any certainty if this was the top guy that he was going after, but I have to believe that he was, again, up there, because I just don't think there are many coaches right now, given the circumstance that Penn State's in, that are going to turn down the opportunity to work with a receiving corps that's going to be working with Drew Aller and again, with a program that feels like it's on the cusp of, breaking through and being one of the top 4 programs in the country here over the next couple of seasons.
The voice of Penn State wrestling joining us here on Locked On Nittany Lions, Jeff Ironhead Byers. My name is Zach Seyko. A final thought on the receiving coach change, Jeff. Taylor Stubblefield, I think, did okay. Like, he did some things right, but obviously not enough to keep the job at Penn State. I mean, it felt like it was just a revolving door for a period of time, and then he kind of settled it down for 3 years. But again, if you want to make that jump, as you said, like quoting James Franklin being great, and then there's elite, everybody's got to be on board the train for that. So recruiting is obviously a big deal. And we know that a lot of people from that Virginia area will in time follow Marques Hagans, but what else would you like to see him do that maybe Taylor Stubblefield came up short with?
Yeah, I think it's I think there's a couple of things in play, and the more I talk to people, it sounds like the Stubblefield decision had as much to do with recruiting. And by the way, it's not just recruiting the high school kids anymore, right? It's the transfer portal,
re-recruiting your own players.
Yeah, that you're targeting out of the transfer portal, both from other schools and your own players, and keeping them in place. So I think, being aggressive with the transfer portal and on the recruiting front is a big part of it. I also do still think that they're looking for better production from those 3 through 5, 6 guys in your receiving rotation. I think Penn State over the last couple of years has been very good with its top guy, and arguably going too deep with a lot of production. But after that, there's been a pretty substantial drop off. And I think when you look at the names and the reputations, at least, of the kids that they've been bringing in, you're expecting more, I think, from the core as a group, the receiving core as a group, than what you were getting. And so, I think, and listen, part of it is Drew Aller, I think, is going to be able to spread the ball around a little more as well. I mean, I think that's part of it. And obviously having a couple of stud running backs helps everybody involved too, because having a strong running game obviously allows you to open some things up with what you can do with the passing game. So again, but I think the two big things that they're expecting from him is both the recruiting and the transfer portal, and getting the kids that they want to stay, and consistently bringing in some big names each year, or at least if not big names, guys that are going to contribute consistently. And then again, I think it's just building the depth, and it's not really building the depth. I guess to me, it's more getting production from the depth, on a regular basis. And I think, we'll see what happens next year. But again, it feels like there's a pretty good chance of all of that occurring here over the next couple of years.
It is Locked On Nittany Lions with special guest Jeff Ironhead Byers, the voice of Penn State Wrestling. I am Zach Seyko, and we're going to do just that. We're going to talk about Penn State Wrestling. We're recapping Michigan and Michigan State before we get into one of the biggest dual meets, if not the biggest, across the NCAA for this season. That is coming up next. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here, and we're really excited about our brand new sports betting partner for Locked On, because they're the #1 sports book in America, and that is FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make sports betting easy and fun. New customers join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So that's all it takes. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets, from the money line to point spreads and player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen every day. For your second listen, make sure to check out the brand new podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. That is Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, you get big name experts, insiders, players, and coaches. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Zach Seyko. You can follow me on Twitter at Zach_Seyko. And Jeff, you don't have Jeff Ironhead Byers on the other side, the voice of Penn State Wrestling. And Jeff, you don't have a personal Twitter, but I feel it's good to shout out the Penn State Wrestling Twitter that's seen underneath you there. Penn State and then WREST for our audio listeners that can't see, of course, the graphic.
Yeah, I'm working to get into the modern age. One of these days, hopefully fairly soon, I'll get my own Twitter account. But Pat Donguy does a great job with the Penn State Wrestling Twitter, so that's a good one to promote.
So, and that's what we're doing here by talking about what just a great finish that Penn State had all the way through. Well, it wasn't a great start and a great finish. It was actually everything in between, because they won 8 consecutive bouts after losing the lightweight and then ultimately losing the heavyweight, which I was a little surprised at, but they were 1-2 for a reason, and Of course, we'll talk about that. We're recapping Michigan and Michigan State, and then we're getting into Iowa, which is going to be a little bit closer than the Spartans and Wolverines were. But the big one was number 1 versus number 3, Michigan State, unranked. They don't have a win in the Big Ten, so not really much to take away except a couple of things there that I thought were interesting. But for Michigan, I mean, we called it kind of. I mean, we weren't saying, hey, this is set in stone, but folks, you at least had to expect that Penn State was going to take it and run with it. And that's exactly what they did. Jeff, what was your immediate reaction after Penn State clobbered Michigan the way it did? I mean, that was number 1 versus number 3, but it felt like number 1 versus number 33, the way the score finished up.
Yeah, as we got closer to the match, I actually told Michael Schroeder, the strength and conditioning coach, was down on the floor right before getting the interview with Kale and just going over the weigh-in sheets and everything. And I told him, I said, I think Penn State's going to win the final 9. And darn near
very
had
close.
that right. But it was one of those things, and this will happen in dual meets. I think it kind of happened with Iowa and Nebraska on Friday night as well, where Iowa won 8 of 10 as well against the Cornhuskers, and Nebraska's got a very good team also. But sometimes it's just the matchups. And listen, there were a lot of close bouts, right? You had 2 that went into extra wrestling. Obviously, if those both go the other way, the dual meet score is closer. Now, I don't think Penn State. It was pretty hard, truthfully, to see the scenario where Michigan was going to win the dual meet. Mm-hmm. But, if Michigan wins those 2 overtime bouts, again, it's a much closer duel than what you ended up with. But I just had a good feeling. I liked the matchups. I liked the way the freshmen were wrestling going into the weekend in terms of what they've been doing in practice, and just kind of the feel that they seemed to have going into it. And yeah, I thought Penn State wrestled really well, and I didn't think Michigan wrestled all that poorly. But mm-hmm. I think Penn State just has a really special team this year. And Greg Kirkfleet didn't look. He just looked lethargic by his standards, and I think Mason Paris obviously had something to do with that, and you give him credit. But I don't know if Kirkfleet, you never know with these, with the kids, if, he just didn't get a good night's sleep, just was feeling a little off, was a little under the weather. I'm not aware of anything, by the way. I'm not looking to make excuses. As far as I know, he was 100% healthy, but he just didn't seem to have the same energy. And the fact that he wasn't able to get out on bottom in that final 25 seconds or so was probably, for me, the most surprising thing of the entire duel meet.
And on to Levi Haynes and Alex Facundo. I mean, and Shane Van Ness can be even lumped in here as well, but it's more that he didn't really face as tough of a matchup this time around. Yeah. But Levi Haynes to upset, quote unquote, I mean, Will Lewan was ranked higher, and then you had Cam Amin ranked top 5 against Facundo, and then he gets the criteria for the riding time, which I thought was, I'm watching that in real time, and I'm like, man, this what you couldn't have asked for a better match from Facundo. But I got to imagine that from your perspective in Penn State's that Haynes and Facundo are very underrated with those mid-teen rankings at this point in time.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, I mean, I get it. Until guys prove themselves collegiately, you can't rank them above guys that have already established themselves. So, I mean, I completely get it, but I don't think there's anybody within the program, and I don't think there's that many people that follow wrestling closely nationally that thought, Facundo was in the lower half of the top 30. And same thing with Levi Haynes. If he is the starter, right, he's a guy that, that both those guys are probably top 10 anyway. And I think if I saw it right, I think Haynes is up to number 9 in the Intermat rankings today. And Facundo shot all the way up to number 5. And I think that's probably a little closer to where they belong. I think, personally, I think Facundo is probably a top 3 or 4 guy when it's all said and done. And I think Haynes probably is in that same range at 157. And the thing with both of those guys is, I mean, they're really good now, but they're just scratching the surface of what they're going to be able to do collegiately. And these are really good bouts, again, win or lose, for them to get under their belt and to get a feel for, and obviously all the better when you win them, just because it gives you that added shot of confidence moving forward.
So you already covered it by bringing up Greg Kirkfleet and Mason Paris. That was the last one I really thought was notable. I mean, the series is now 3-2. This is probably one of the better rivalries in all of college wrestling. They're going to face each other in the Big Ten title. They could even face each other in the national championship as well. And Kirkfleet has a tough test in Iowa, but we'll get to that in the final segment. So moving over, and Penn State again beat Michigan 30-8 in this one for the overall dual meet score. Let's go to Michigan State now, who unranked, and Penn State was able to not look ahead too much, because I call these kinds of meets or games sandwiches, because you have a really tough one in number 3 Michigan, then you have the really tough one in number 2 Iowa, and then you got that one where you could overlook, and Penn State stayed very disciplined. That's a testament to Cale Sanderson and this coaching staff. Gary Steen gets his first Big Ten win against a ranked opponent, which was really neat. But I thought it was kind of interesting that Levi Haynes didn't wrestle in this one. Aaron Brooks didn't as well, but I'm kind of more interested in is there some strategy to this? Because I don't understand. Maybe I want to get some clarification from not only myself, but any listeners, subscribers, and viewers that are wondering, is Levi Haynes going to stick in the lineup because Terrell Barraclaw went in the lineup and didn't do so well? So is it Levi Haynes' starting spot until the red shirt gets involved? Are they burning the red shirt, Jeff? What can you tell us about Levi Haynes' situation for the remainder of this season?
Yeah, I think there were a couple of things in play. One is, you have Iowa coming up, and why not keep the Hawkeyes guessing as to who it is that you're going to send out there? Obviously, if Haynes wrestles against Michigan State, then it's definitive he's pulling the red shirt, and you know darn well if he's healthy, he's going to get against Iowa. So I think part of it is, keep Iowa guessing a little bit in terms of who you're going to send out there. I also think they wanted to see, because they both had, both Michigan and Michigan State had really good 157 pounders. And I think part of it was, hey, let's see how, each of our kids do. And I thought Barraclaw wrestled a terrific match. I mean, he came up a little short, but I think they are both right there, Haynes and Barraclaw. That being said, I think Haynes showed that he's a little further ahead right now. And again, I just think his upside is kind of through the roof. So I also think the coaches are probably wanting to talk to both kids, make sure everybody's on the same page. Not that, if they go with Haynes, not that Barraclaw is going to be, gung-ho about the decision. But I think talking with them, making sure, if they are pulling Levi's red shirt, that he's okay with it. And to talk over with the coaching staff, because, this is a decision that has some lasting effects as well. Levi Haynes with the red shirt is probably a strong contender as a 4-time national champion.
Yeah, very much so.
By the way, maybe a 4-time national champion without the red shirt, but I think that's part of the conversation is, hey, are we being fair to the kid, right? And do we need Levi Haynes in terms of winning the national title this year? How much of a difference do we think there is in terms of points that can be gained at the national tournament? And do we think that difference is worth burning the red shirt? Now, I think at the end of the day, the answer to all of that is yes, it is worth it, because a couple of things. One, you don't know what the future holds, right? Like you might be holding off for Levi Haynes, and then, next season there's I'm not wishing anything, obviously, but you don't know. I mean, it could be a horrific injury. There could be, you just don't know what the future holds for any of us, right? Tomorrow's never promised. So, I think, sometimes you get a little too caught up in, hey, let's wait for the future because we think that's going to be really bright. Well, you can see the future is kind of now, to me, when you're watching Levi Haynes. And I just think, again, at the end of the day, I do think there's a substantial potential difference in points there. And I think it's debatable whether or not Penn State needs those points at this year's national tournament. But again, you just never know with injuries and everything else how things are going to play out. And I just think you want to get your strongest lineup out there. And to me, Levi Haynes right now is part of putting your strongest lineup out there.
Jeff Ironhead Byers joining me, Zach Seyko, on another Locked On Nittany Lions, and we're going to preview Penn State and the Iowa Hawkeyes coming up next. Welcome back to Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko. Joining me, special guest, the voice of Penn State Wrestling, Jeff Ironhead Byers. And we're talking Penn State Wrestling against Iowa coming up this Friday. It's another one back in the Bryce Jordan Center. It was a sellout crowd for the first one against Michigan. And the crowd, the atmosphere was already great in that one. Somehow it's got to find a way to be even better because Iowa is a tougher task at hand. When we looked at Michigan, we felt pretty confident that Penn State was going to be able to handle 7, 8, even 9 bouts when we were just kind of kicking it around. And then obviously in real time, you said, they could go and sweep all the way through. Of course, we saw Mason Paris come up with a victory at the end, but that's fine. Penn State controlled basically from early on to all the way through when it didn't matter anymore. When it came to the team score, everything was just down to individual. That's not necessarily the case with number 2 Iowa, and that's why they are number 2. But Penn State is a 6-point favorite. Jeff, if you didn't know, now you can bet on wrestling. You can bet on collegiate wrestling. And Penn State is a -6 favorite against the Hawkeyes, meaning that they would have essentially a 2 decision advantage. That's 2 3-point to sit without. They're probably going to get bonus points here and there, but that's why we're breaking it all down. And there's a lot of good matchups in this one. This is the one that the internet has taken a hold of, and something I want to start with is Roman Bravo Young and Spencer Lee. What would it be like to see them wrestle? This isn't going to happen because part of the wrestling in these dual meets is playing chess. And I can't see Iowa sacrificing 6 points in what they believe. And it's nothing against Gary Steen, but Spencer Lee is one of the best wrestlers we're going to ever see at 125. I can confidently sit here and say that. And he's looking for a pin against Gary Steen. And that's 6 points for the Hawkeyes and very valuable for a team score, especially when you get to 174, 184, 197. And what happens at the heavyweight? Is it going to be close? Is it going to be within range to where Tony Cassiope can flip that? But what are your thoughts on Spencer Lee potentially moving up to 133? And then there's the crazy idea that RBY should move down to 125 and somehow cut 8 pounds in 5 days from when they wrestled on Sunday to Friday. So that's obviously unhealthy and very impossible. But Spencer Lee moving up to 133, just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things in play here, and it is fun to speculate. And I mean, it would be a heck of a fun match to watch.
Yeah.
As far as like Roman can't move down to 125 for a couple of reasons. One is he's not certified at 125. So with college wrestling now, to compete at any time during the season, you have to certify before the season at a given weight class. And Roman is certified at 33. So it's not, it literally is not possible. It also, I don't think is possible for Roman to get to 125 now. He's cutting a good bit to get to 133. So that is definitively not happening. That it can't and won't happen. And really, Spencer Lee moving up to 133, there was a time when that would make a lot more sense, and I could see Iowa doing it. And it's not that they can't do it, but Spencer has to stay within a certain percentage of 125 to remain eligible there as well. And so to compete at 133, he would still, to retain his 125 eligibility, which is where he's going to wrestle in the postseason. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it would have to be, he wouldn't be allowed to weigh more than about 127, 127 and a half. Well, you're not going to go into a match of that caliber, giving up that type of weight, with the potential of possibly gaining 3 points, right? Like best case scenario, you're thinking going into that, if you're Iowa, is you still get the 6 points. And I think that's unlikely, as good as Ayala is, and he is good.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's getting the pin there over Steen. Gary's been pretty good about staying off of his back. Could still get 4 or 5 points. but even if Spencer does get the decision over Roman, again, I don't know that at the end of the day that you feel overly confident about that if you're Iowa, right? Like, I mean, it's a high risk to me for very little reward at the end of the day. So I think there's virtually no chance of that happening. Now it'd be one thing if they really, they're looking at the matchup and it's like, oh, we know Spencer can take Roman no matter what he weighs in at. But with Roman's quickness, and Spencer, obviously he's been looking great, but he is coming off, less, I guess a little over a year ago now, the 2 knee surgeries. That's a pretty tall task. So again, I think there's virtually no chance of it. It would be fun to see a Spencer Lee, Roman Bravo Young. I mean, that would be a heck of a lot of fun for the fans. But yeah, I don't think that's happening. And I think, Lee, obviously you're expecting if you're Iowa to get 6 points there at 125. And listen, I think if you're Iowa, you're going into this thinking Teskey's going to keep this to a decision with Roman. So, I think the Hawkeyes go in thinking they're going to be up 6-3 after those first 2 bouts. And again, I think best case scenario, flipping it around is you're up 8-0. I just don't know that at the end of the day, because I think there's also a significant risk that, you're only up 5-3 instead of the 6-3 as it is. So that's just, again, I think the way most coaches and Iowa's coaches will be looking at it.
Yeah, it's kind of can Gary Steen hold his own for Penn State, and then can Brody Teskey for Iowa hold his own? I think that's really what the debate is. It's not a matter of what can Spencer Lee and Roman Bravo Young do, but those other guys who are serious underdogs in this one, can they carry their water essentially? So this is the lineup that's projected: Spencer Lee and Gary Steen at 125, 133 Roman Bravo Young and Brody Teskey. We know that, but this is where it gets really interesting. Okay, 133, number 144, number 4 Beau Bartlett against number 2 Real Woods of Iowa. Then at 149, number 14 Shane Van Ness against number 7 Max Murin. At 157, these rankings a little outdated here, but number 17 Levi Haynes against number 21 Kobe Seabrick. Numbers 165, number 10 Patrick Kennedy of Iowa against number 16 Alex Facundo. 174, number 1 Carter Starachi against number 16 Nelson Brands. At 184, number 1 Aaron Brooks against number 8 Abe Assad. 197, number 9 Jacob Warner of Iowa against number 4 Max Dean, and the heavyweight number 2 Greg Kirkfleet against number 3 Tony Cassiope. So Kirkfleet does not get a week off here with who he's wrestling. Really a preview of what's to come. So out of all those matchups, I gotta imagine 141 is kind of the most enticing here. At least it is to me, because I feel like that is a serious turning point for either team, depending on the result.
Yeah, I feel like there's really those 4 in a row there to me, from 141 through 165, are all really
toss-ups.
intriguing. And yeah, Woods has been. I had a chance to watch him against Nebraska. That's really the first time I've seen him this season, and in an Iowa uniform, the transfer from Stanford, and I'm really impressed with the difference. And I mean, he was very good at Stanford. I don't mean to slight what he had already accomplished, but man, he has taken another leap in terms of the level of wrestling that he's competing at. I was really impressed with him, and I think it's going to be the first really big test for Beau Bartlett this entire season. So I do think that is a fascinating matchup. I think it's a contrast of styles between the two, and I can hardly wait to see that one. I think it could help set the tone. But then again, no matter who wins that, you turn around and then 149, I think Penn State feels like Shane Van Ness should be right there with Max Murin. I know Iowa thinks Murin should win that one. But that feels to me, like all 4 of these feel like really toss-up bouts that truly could go either way. I think it's going to be who's on, who is willing to go for it when the pressure is there. I think all of those bouts are going to come down to third period and maybe, expert wrestling. And again, it's going to be one mistake or one, really good shot. I think that's going to win each of those. And much the same thing at 157, no matter who Penn State puts out there. I think that's, again, a really intriguing bout. Siebrecht has been really solid this year for Iowa. And then, Patrick Kennedy has, he beat Facundo in that who's number one. I'm trying to think. I think it was 2019. I might be off. It might have been 2020, but the who's number one that they have for high school, and Kennedy beat him. I think it was 5-2, but he had two really good takedowns, really good finishes against Facundo. And so, Kennedy knows that he can beat Facundo. Now, I think Alex is on a different level, but Kennedy's obviously been really good this year for Iowa as well. And I think, the potential is there for those two to be meeting many times over the course of their collegiate careers. So I think those four bouts, to me, Zach, are all just really intriguing and really fascinating. And I don't think I think either team's fans could go into this match thinking that they can run the table there, and I don't think it's unrealistic. I mean, I think if Iowa gets on a roll, I could see them winning all four of those bouts. And certainly with the way Penn State's kids have been wrestling, and the freshmen in particular, I can see a scenario where Penn State wins all four. I think it's more likely that the teams either split, or if one team can take 3 of 4 there, I think it puts them in very good shape to win the dual meet here on Friday night.
I think that's the story of it, which side can surprise in those toss-up matches. And there's quite a few of them, not unlike the Michigan one, where we sat here and said, okay, this is a Penn State decision. Maybe they get some bonus points in these spots, but we felt pretty confident that Penn State was going to get a win at these weights. Nevertheless, I can see these going either way, and I don't think it's going to be a 4-0 sweep. I even think 197 is going to be a close one, and then you have 2 and 3 at the heavyweight. So could it come down to 197 in heavyweight? Are we going to get to that point where it's going to be riding on Max Dean and Greg Kirkfleet instead of them taking a victory lap? They have some serious responsibility to close it out in the Bryce Jordan Center.
Yeah, there's no question. It could very well come down there. And, again, Iowa is figuring on 3 bonus points from Lee at 125, or 2 at the very least. And I think, for Penn State, one of the questions is, can Carter Starachi get bonus points at 174 against Nelson Brands? And can you get bonus points from Aaron Brooks against Abe Assad? And if Penn State can get bonus points there or somewhere else along the way, I mean, maybe Roman Bravo Young can, pick up a bonus point against Brody Teskey. But, bonus points, I think, could come into play here, depending on how those 4 bouts play out from 141 to 165. That could be a big factor. And I agree with you, Zach. 197 in heavyweight, to me, again, I think Iowa goes in thinking it's going to win both of those. I mean, I think they really believe that their kids are not just capable, but should win those 2 bouts. And I know Penn State's coaches are feeling Penn State should win those 2 bouts. So, to me, I really do. I think those 6 are kind of toss-up bouts, and I think each team and the kids on their teams would tell you, no, we think we should win that. But I think you have, again, 6 that could really go either way. I think Penn State is obviously a solid favorite at 33 and a prohibitive favorite at 74 and 84. And obviously Iowa is an overwhelming favorite at 125. But I think the other bouts are all going to be very close, and I don't think it would be terribly shocking to see them go either way. And I think that's what's going to make for just a really fun night. I think one of these teams could get on a roll. I mean, again, I think Penn State is capable of having a score similar to what it had against Michigan. Yeah, if everything breaks their way and they win all of the close ones, and listen, they won 4 overtime matches this past weekend, so they've been winning those close ones. But anytime you're in those 1-move matches, you're 1 move away from losing. And Yeah, could I see Iowa winning fairly comfortably in the dual meet? Yeah, if they sweep those 6 and Spencer gets the pin, yeah, it could be a huge night for the Hawkeyes. I think the most likely scenario is, of those 6, I think Penn State probably wins at least 3 of them, and I think that puts the Nittany Lions in pretty good shape to win the dual meet. But it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun, and I think all of these bouts just have a lot of intrigue with them because you don't know what's going to happen. And listen, we've seen over the years, we know this bout's going to be close, and then all of a sudden somebody gets a pin. You get that one big move, and you're counting on 3 points there, and all of a sudden you gave up 6, or vice versa. And that's certainly part of wrestling as well, is you get those unexpected points somewhere along the way as well, and that can change the entire complexion of a dual meet in particular as well. So I just think it's going to be a lot of fun. I really think there's a very good chance, Zach, that they do set yet again here at Penn State an indoor attendance record. I think there's a very good chance that they'll get a good bit over 16,000 here with all of the interest in this dual meet, and I do think the crowd is going to be revved up. An 8:30 start gives them a little extra chance to get hydrated for the duel, and I think it should be a lot of fun here on Friday night.
In the Bryce Jordan Center on the campus of Penn State University Park. Be there if you can. I know tickets they're sold out, but they're available if you can make it. It's must watch and must listen. If you've made it this far through the show, this is an important plug. You can listen to Jeff Ironhead Byers, the voice of Penn State Wrestling. I highly encourage you, if you can't go, to watch it and then sync his call with the match itself. And I know that it's going to be on the Big Ten Network and then have your call underneath of it. That's the way that I've watched them when I can't make it to a match. But Jeff, it's going to be on Go PSU Sports. It's also going to be on 103.7 and 104.3 locally on the in-town radio. I know that. And your call starts at 8:10 p.m. Eastern time to preview it once again, as we did here on this show. So thanks so much again, Jeff, for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen every day. Make sure to check out the brand new show, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, you get to hear from big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for checking out this episode. And thanks so much if you have already subscribed to the YouTube channel, helping us get over 800 subscribers for Locked On Nittany Lions. If you haven't already, please do hit the subscribe button and like all your favorite shows and episodes, and leave some feedback, any questions you want in the comments section. More content is set to come about Penn State football, men's basketball, and wrestling, as men's basketball and wrestling are in the heat of the season, and Penn State has the building blocks around them for a very fun 2023. And it'll all be right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.